It's time to sew the blocks together and work on the inner border for our candy cane lane bench pillow. I have all of the blocks ready to be sewn together, and then I have the border, the inner border fabric fused with fusible interfacing on the back. This is one long strip, and this border will run across the top and bottom of the bench pillow. I will change to my Deco Bob thread. It's a very thin, strong thread for my piecing. And I will be using my little 1/4 inch quilting piecing foot so that I can butt the fabric right up to this little guide, and that will help with my 1/4 inch seams. Let's go press these. I am going to press the seams open, and just remember to use a pressing cloth because we have several pieces of clear vinyl that can't be touched with the iron directly. So let's get these pressed. So here are all the blocks sewn together, and this is just darling. I love getting to this stage of a project. I love this. It's just super cute. So I have my whole strip, and again, it's just one strip. We don't have to piece this border at all because it's long enough for the width of this bench pillow. So let's get started on the inner border. So I've opened Embellishment Essential Software, and I am going to be bringing in the files for the inner border. But these files, I'm going to do something a little bit different than just bringing in a file that is the correct size, because I have a border that I want to use that is a little bit too big. To bring in the file, I can use the Merge Stitch File icon. However, I like to just open the folder where I keep all of my files, and then I will open the folder that has the background quilting. I am going to be using the tree one, and I am going to bring in the 14-inch 2 by 14-inch design. This design has a horizontal and a vertical design, and I need the vertical, so I will drag and drop that and put that into my hoop. Now I also want to go back to Christmas 2 and block by block, and I need to bring in the 1" by 14" design, and I will drag and drop that into the hoop, and I'll show you why I am bringing that one in. So this is a design that a lot of people did for the candy cane lane inner border, and that's, you know, cute, but I really love this Christmas tree border that I have. But you can see that the Christmas tree is much larger, and if I click on it, it is 2.5 inches wide, which I guess technically I'd probably be able to get that done because my fabric is 5 inches, but that doesn't give me really any room to, you know, have as kind of a safety when I'm quilting these. So what I'm going to do is make this tree design a little bit smaller. Now, first, I will say that most of the time it's not advisable to change the size of an embroidery file. However, Embrilliance will only let you change to a certain extent. You can go a little bit smaller and you can go a little bit larger. And it usually, for the designs that I have done, hasn't affected the stitch out. However, when I get this to the size I need, I will stitch out a sample to make sure that it does stitch out correctly. And the first thing I'm going to do is select both of these files, and I am going to Command A on my Mac, and I am going to come up to the rotate right and just rotate these so I can work with them on how they will be stitched. Now, before I resize this, I am going to delete everything but the background quilting. So if I come over to this design, I will select the first step, hold my shift key down, and click on step number 4 so that all the first 4 steps are highlighted, and I will hit delete on my keyboard. So I am only left with the Christmas tree design. Now I'm going to do the opposite with this design. So I will select the second design, and I just want to get rid of the quilting because I don't want these little leaf patterns. So I am going to select the last step in that quilting and hit delete on my keyboard. So now I'm left with just the placement lines and the tack down lines. Now, the reason that I didn't just take this design and shrink it smaller is because then it will shrink the sizing between the tack down and all of the other placement lines, and that would mess up the background quilting. So this background quilting setup and placement lines is the correct size, and now I just need to make the trees fit. Now you can see that I can go quite small, and that looks like it would fit about perfect. But then you can also see that I still have all of this space because I am going to be using my 14-inch hoop so that I have less hoopings to do. So what I will do is select the trees. I will Command C on my Mac to copy and Command V to paste. And then I will move it over using the arrows. Now you can also right click and copy and paste. And I am going to move this over, and I am going to see if this will fit or if it is going to be a little bit too big. So I can see that it's overlapping a little bit. So now I just have to decide if I like that, or if I were to get a smaller design and be able to move it over a little, if I would like that a little bit better. I think I am going to go ahead and just keep it like this. Now these ends of the quilting do not match up, and I'm okay with that. It just, kind of looks like the mountains. And so I am good with that placement and that design. So the first thing I'm going to do is save this and stitch a sample to make sure that the trees stitch out like I want them to. Here is the little sample that I stitched out. I stitched out just 4 of the trees of that design that I made smaller. This is just muslin. I didn't even put any stabilizer, or I didn't even iron this. So I just wanted to make sure that it would stitch out okay. And I think it looks great. And so I'm going to use that for the border. So let's go continue in Embellishment Essential software to finish up this design. So now that I know that my design stitches out fine, I can go ahead and finish this design up. I wanted to show one thing in case I didn't quite make it clear when I was bringing in the designs originally. So this design, it was those little leaf loop patterns, and it is 1 inch by 14 inch, which is the size of the inner border, and that is what makes up this size of the placement and tack down lines. If I go back to the tree 1, you'll notice that the smallest width is the 2 inch. And so that's why I had to bring in the 2 inch by 14 inch. I want the 14 inch long so that I can stitch it lengthwise in my 9 by 14 inch hoop, and so I have less hoopings to do. But this didn't come smaller than 2 inch wide, and so that's why I needed to shrink that. So I think I didn't really mention that when I first brought the designs in. Now I have some changes that I still need to make to this design, and I want to make all my changes before making the second copy. Otherwise, I will have to make changes on 2 designs instead of 1. So if I look to the right hand side, the first thing I need to do is to move the placement lines and tack down lines to be the first step. Right now, the tree design was the very first design I brought in, and so that is the first design. And the machine, of course, stitches in this order. And so the background quilting needs to be the last design. So I will select the placement and tack down lines, and I will right click and move to first. So that is the first step, which is what we want. Now I want to make one more change to the background quilting. So if I open the steps, I have the placement for the batting, the tack down of the batting, the placement of the fabric, and the tack down of the fabric. I do not need the tack down of the batting because I am cutting my batting to exactly 1 inch, and so I can select that and hit delete. Now normally in the other blocks I did not use the placement for the fabric because our background fabric was cut so much larger, and this just was a step that wasn't necessary. However, in the case of borders, this border fabric will be cut exactly to this size, which is 1.5 inches. And I need to know exactly where to place this fabric so that my borders will line up. So I am going to keep that step. I also, of course, need the tack down of that fabric, and then we have the 2 background quiltings. Now when I color sort, those will merge together. Now that I've done the changes that I've wanted to, and again, these are optional changes, I need to Command A to select all of the designs. I'm going to come up to the rotate left. I will come to the right hand side to this compass and select H. And now, so that I will be able to get this in the center of my hoop, I will come to Utility and Center in Hoop. Now with all of these still selected, I am going to Command C to copy and Command V to paste. And then I will just use the arrow key to move this over. You can also right click and copy and paste. So I'm ready to color sort, so I can come to Utility and Color Sort. And it's been changed by 3 colors or 3 stops. Always select a new view to make sure that it did what you were expecting. So on the right hand side, you can see that it is now one design and it has 3 steps. The placement for the batting and the placement of the fabric will be done in one step. Then it will be the tack down of the fabric and then the quilting. Now, normally these 2 steps are done at a different time. And so if you are not cutting your batting exactly to size and you will be using the tack down of the batting, those will not join as one step. So that's why it's important to always do a new view to make sure that the new file is doing what you need it to do. For me, this is fine. When I first put my hoop in, it will do both of those at the same time. And again, for me, that works just fine. So once I've got this exactly how I want it, I will come to File, Save Stitch File As, and I will name my design. And I am going to put it into my Combined Files folder and save it so I can add it to my USB. There's one additional thing that I wanted to talk about that I don't think I've talked about in any other video, and that is how to send your design straight to your machine and bypassing having to save it to a USB. Now, of course, you do have to have a machine that has Wi-Fi capabilities, and if you do, you can come to Utility and send it wirelessly to your machine. This is a great way to send something quickly without having to, again, save to a USB. And I did it this way when I was stitching out my little sample trees. But for me, generally, I do like to save all of the files that I have merged or edited in some way. I just like to have them on the USB so I have it all together while I'm working on my project. But that is another way that you can send something to your machine. You would click on that. You could name your design. You could leave it as a default, which for mine, when I stitched out the 4 little trees, I just left it as design and then I sent it to my machine. So that's just another way that you can save a design. I will go to Embroidery and to my USB and then my Combined Files folder, and I will choose the inner border and hit Set and Embroidery. And now I'm going to go to Layout and Move, and I am going to move this design all the way to the right. I could move it all the way to the left as well. I'm going to select OK, and then I always like to go to the plus minus needle just in case I need to use this for whatever reason. Now the reason I'm moving it all the way to the right is because I still, as always, have all of my roll of stabilizer attached. I have it coming to the front of my machine this time. And so I want the design as far as I can get it to the right or the left so that I will be able to utilize this in one of my smaller hoops, like my 4x4. And I can save that stabilizer. And again, the reason I chose my big hoop versus a thinner hoop is I can do longer sections and I have less hoopings to do overall. So let's get the placement for the batting and the fabric. So I stitched out the placement for the batting and the fabric. Remember, it color sorted those steps together. And I, again, did that because I cut my batting exactly to this size. Now, if you are doing it the traditional way, you would do a little bit larger piece of batting and then run the tack down and trim that, and then run the placement for the fabric. So I have just taken, I have one long strip that's long enough for the entire pillow, and I've sprayed just, 12 inches or so to fit this with temporary spray, and I'm just going to line it up with that center placement. And now I will get my fabric and I will line it up to these outer placement lines. I will put a little bit of this end up past the top placement line. Oh my gosh, I adore this border. I am so glad that I decided to take the 2-inch border and make it smaller instead of just assuming I could only do a 1-inch border. I am in love with this. It is so cute. Even cuter in person. Oh my gosh. I love it, and I'm so glad that I decided to do this one. So now let's get set up to do the next tubing. I might stare at it for a few minutes though. So I'm going to trim a little bit of this stabilizer. I'm not going to worry about trimming it real close right now, except for where I need to line it up. I'm just going to get rid of some of the excess, and I'll worry about even more with the seam allowances when I'm completely done with the border. So the very bottom that I will continue quilting, I am going to trim this right next to the placement line, which is my pink. And then we'll be ready to run our next set of placement lines on the stabilizer. And then I'll show you how I'm going to set that up. So I have my new stabilizer in and my hoop attached, and it of course asks or tells me that I'm finished embroidering because I just did our 2 strips. I will select OK. And now I will just run this again. I don't need to do anything else. I will just run this 2 more times. So I'm ready to line up my next hooping, and I have sprayed the material, the fabric, and the back of the batting. So what I need to do, here is the top of my hoop, and of course the piece that I just quilted, that will go towards the top. I'm just going to flip this back out of the way, and I can see, because I didn't cut the stabilizer, completely even, so it's easy for me to see where this ends. So I am just going to line up the edge of this stabilizer, which you can see that little pink line, and that's why I did a thread color that I could see that is going to line up with this next top. So I need to line that up as best I can. And then I need to line up this batting in that center. And then the edges of my fabric, if I have this lined up, should match with the edge of the placement for the fabric. And of course, this is why we wanted the placement for the fabric this time, when usually I don't use that because our fabric, you know, is much wider. But this is cut, again, exactly to size. And so I will tape this and put the next one on, and we can go do the second hooping. That stitched out perfect. You can see right where this second hooping started, they line up just great. And you can see we have the same little space where the first hooping ended and this one starts. Similar to where remember we had the two designs, and so we had that little spacing. There's the top of the hoop. It just looks wonderful. I love it. Now we'll do the same thing to get ready for the third hooping. Now the only thing that I'm going to do different is once I remove this, I am going to put this whole strip up next to my quilt so that I can cut my batting to the width of my blocks. So I know where to cut that off and end. That's the only thing I'm going to do different, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So let me show you how I'm cutting my batting for the last hooping to size. So I have the opposite end, or the quilted end, and I have that clipped to the opposite side of my blocks. And I lined this edge of the batting, which is, you know, with this edge of the stabilizer, I lined it up even so that the batting matches on that other side. Then I've just laid this strip down, and my batting was this, you know, this much longer. And so I just cut my batting to be even with the other end of the quilt, so that when this is cut to 1/4 of an inch, that batting won't be in the seam. Now it's not really critical on this project because the borders actually only go on the top and the bottom of the quilt because it's a pillow. And so there's not going to be, for example, another, you know, border this way where the seams, if this batting happens to be in the seam. So I hope that makes sense. And I'm not sure I even said this, but I'm actually not making this into a pillow. I am just going to make it into a wall hanging. And of course, we'll show you that. I'm almost ready to be done with this. So my last hooping, again, I cut the batting to the length or the width of the bench pillow. And so you can see that it doesn't go all the way to the end of the placement lines, and that's fine. And also the fabric is going to be longer than both of those. So, and that's okay too. So I will just lay this, and again, make sure that it lines up with the placement, and I will tape that. So I have my borders pressed and ready to be stitched on, and I will flip them right sides together and line up the edge of this batting so that it lines up with the batting on the opposite side. And you can kind of see the shadow, and that's just to help, of course, not get batting in my seam. And then I will clip it, and then I will do the same thing on the opposite end, and then clip the center and sew a 1/4 of an inch seam, and I will do that for both border strips. Now I have everything clipped, and I am going to sew from this back side so that I can make sure that these seams stay open when I sew. And since I don't have any seams on that side, I don't have to worry about. So let's go get this sewn together. So I have the border sewn on, and I love it. Love it, love it. So before I finish with the larger borders that go on the top and the bottom, I am going to put this glitter vinyl on the bottom that's kind of like a, you know, a little snowdrift. Okay, so I took that 3/8 of an inch off, and now when I line it up, I like it much better, because if you remember last time, this covered up the entire post and you couldn't even see that cute little detail. Okay, so I am having to make some changes. So I put my glitter, my white glitter vinyl on the bottom, and I did not like how you could see all of the thick, you know, satin stitching and things underneath of it. And when I first tacked it down, I thought, oh, I'm just going to pull it up and maybe do flocked vinyl, which flock is kind of a fuzzy, and I thought that is thicker, and so I won't have all the lumps and bumps. And so I took my glitter vinyl off, and you know, it stuck in some places, and so I couldn't just leave it off, which, looking back, if I were to do this again, I would not put any of this snow probably down on the bottom, because I'm going to show you why. So anyways, I did a strip. I cut, you know, the same strip out, and I did a layer, and I thought, oh, surely that will cover up and won't be as bumpy. And I'm not sure if you can see it, and it looks worse in person, and it looks bumpy. This is the flocked, and so I'm not very happy. Again, it looks better in the video than it does in person, and so I have to put something here because, you know, there's things that are attached that I can't get off from this original glitter vinyl. So I cut a second piece of the flocked vinyl, and it is very thin, but it has kind of, like I said, like a velvety texture. And so I am putting a second layer over to see if I can smooth a little bit of that out. I'll show you in a minute. You can still see, which I'm okay with seeing a little bit, and it definitely looks better with the second layer. But that's where I am right now. So I'm going to finish putting this last piece over and ironing it. It's HTV. It's just like the silver glitter vinyl, but it's, you know, kind of that little fuzzy, velvety texture. I'm going to finish this up and I'll show you what it looks like. So I'm more happy with adding the second layer. You definitely can see, you know, some of the, or all of where the patterns are underneath. I'm okay with it with the second layer. With the first layer, it was just too much. Anyway, so I'm happy with it. It was a lot of work, but I think in the end it looks okay. Again, if I were to do this, I would not do the snowdrift at all. Now I just need to cut these little strips off the ends, and then I'm ready to do the second border. So I will line up my ruler with the edge of this block, and I'm also going to line up with the seam that is on the border so that I have, you know, two straight edges, and I can see that it's pretty straight right here. So I will just cut these off and get ready to do the other borders.